Pour ouvrir cette vision des stratégies et des ambitions dans le monde et en Europe, on va démarrer tout de suite avec une capsule vidéo d'un témoignage du ministre de l'Énergie et des Ressources naturelles du Québec, Monsieur Jonathan Julien. Si toutefois la régie peut nous envoyer cette séquence vidéo pour ouvrir les témoignages des territoires.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je suis très heureux d'avoir été invité à prendre la parole dans le cadre d'Evolution. Il s'agit d'un événement de grande envergure pour les acteurs du domaine de l'hydrogène. Je suis fier de pouvoir vous présenter ce que le Québec met en place en ce qui a trait à la filière de l'hydrogène vert. Comme plusieurs États dans le monde, le Québec s'est donné des objectifs ambitieux pour la lutte à la décarbonation de son bilan énergétique. Il s'est entre autres fixé une cible de réduction des émissions de gaz à effet de serre de 37,5 % par rapport au niveau de 1990 à l'horizon de 2030. De plus, nous souhaitons atteindre la carboneutralité d'ici 2050. Le Québec est déjà l'État parmi les provinces canadiennes et les États américains qui émet le moins de GES par habitant. Mais nous souhaitons aller plus loin. Puisque 71 % des émissions de GES du Québec sont liées à l'énergie, nous avons élaboré différentes solutions pour réduire ces émissions. L'efficacité énergétique et l'électrification directe en sont de bons exemples. Cependant, ces solutions ne suffiront pas à elles seules pour assurer une transition énergétique complète et pour décarboner l'économie. C'est pourquoi nous travaillons aussi sur des moyens complémentaires, notamment avec l'élaboration de nouvelles filières d'hydrogène vert et de bioénergie ici au Québec. L'hydrogène vert est une solution de choix pour remplacer celle de sources fossiles, par exemple dans des procédés industriels chimiques ou pour décarboner des secteurs difficilement électrifiables. D'ailleurs, le gouvernement du Québec a annoncé récemment qu'il renonçait de façon définitive à extraire des hydrocarbures sur son territoire. Le Québec deviendra ainsi le premier État en Amérique du Nord à fermer la porte à toute exploitation d'énergie fossile sur son territoire. Nous misons donc sur l'électricité et l'énergie renouvelable qui comprennent l'hydrogène vert pour réussir notre transition énergétique. C'est ce que nous souhaitons développer et où nous allons investir. Cela dit, avec une source d'électricité d'origine renouvelable abondante et à coût compétitif, le Québec dispose d'un atout considérable pour produire de l'hydrogène vert. Je rappelle que plus de 99 % de l'électricité produite au Québec provient de sources renouvelables, et plus particulièrement de l'hydroélectricité. D'ailleurs, nous sommes fiers de notre électricité verte et de nos ressources renouvelables. Nous avons même pour ambition de devenir la batterie verte du nord-est de l'Amérique. Les ententes d'exportation d'électricité que nous avons conclues avec le Massachusetts et New York témoignent parfaitement de cette ambition. Maintenant, nous avons l'intention de développer et de faire rayonner notre expertise en hydrogène vert, comme nous l'avons fait et continuons de le faire pour l'hydroélectricité. Le Québec est très bien positionné pour devenir un leader mondial en matière de production d'hydrogène vert et de bioénergie. Plusieurs projets sont en émergence et nous comptons accélérer leur déploiement. Si l'hydrogène vert et les bioénergies seront réunis dans une même stratégie, c'est que ces deux sources offrent des solutions complémentaires à court, moyen et long terme. Elles comportent aussi des enjeux semblables et la demande en hydrogène est liée à la production de bioénergie. Parmi les mesures que nous allons mettre en place grâce à la stratégie, nous entendons adopter des leviers économiques, fiscaux et réglementaires favorables au déploiement des filières des bioénergies et de l'hydrogène vert. De plus, afin de favoriser l'amélioration des connaissances et leur diffusion, nous comptons soutenir l'innovation technologique, appuyer les projets de démonstration et favoriser l'implantation d'entreprises possédant du savoir-faire spécialisé. Puisque les bioénergies et l'hydrogène vert sont encore méconnus du public, nous voulons mettre de l'avant une information transparente et communiquer clairement notre vision. Le déploiement intégré de ces filières sera fait selon les meilleures pratiques en matière d'acceptabilité sociale et de développement durable en partenariat avec les communautés locales et autochtones. Enfin, la collaboration à l'international pour ce qui est de l'hydrogène vert s'avère essentielle pour que tous les États puissent réduire leurs émissions de GES avec succès. Ensemble, nous pouvons, entre autres, réfléchir à des moyens pour implanter de nouveaux modèles d'affaires, pour harmoniser les normes techniques, pour diversifier les produits ou encore pour créer des maillages entre tous les milieux. Les filières de l'hydrogène vert et des bioénergies nous offrent ainsi une occasion privilégiée de développer des économies vertes et bâtir de nouveaux partenariats tant à l'échelle nationale qu'internationale. D'ailleurs, je me dois de mentionner le partenariat de 3 ans signé par le ministère de l'Énergie et des Ressources naturelles du Québec et l'ADEME en 2019. Ce partenariat permet notamment l'échange de bonnes pratiques, le partage d'expériences et de connaissances dans la planification ainsi que la mise en œuvre des politiques et d'initiatives touchant la transition et l'efficacité énergétique. Le développement de la filière de l'hydrogène fait partie des priorités de ce partenariat. En terminant, j'aimerais réaffirmer l'importance de notre collaboration qui, je l'espère, aura des effets positifs sur la transition énergétique du Québec, de la France et du monde entier. Une collaboration continue dans le développement des filières de l'hydrogène vert entre les États est certainement profitable pour tous. Je suis ravi que le Québec puisse servir d'exemple à l'échelle internationale en matière de transition énergétique. C'est en collaborant et en partageant nos connaissances que nous arriverons tous ensemble à faire une véritable différence dans la réduction des émissions de GES et dans la lutte contre les changements climatiques. Je vous remercie pour votre attention et je vous souhaite des échanges hyper fructueux à Evolution.
Ah oui, vous pouvez l'applaudir parce que je pense que vous avez bien entendu plus d'extraction d'hydrocarbures sur le territoire du Québec. Batterie verte du nord-est du continent américain et surtout information transparente et beaucoup de communication. Valérie Bouillon-Delporte, avant d'écouter les témoignages de nos invités, vous êtes directeur de l'écosystème hydrogène chez Michelin. Désolé, je le traduis directement de l'anglais du coup. Vous êtes l'ex-présidente d'Hydrogène Europe et première vice-présidente de France Hydrogène. Donc on va regarder peut-être cet enjeu mobilité en premier, votre vision des choses, vers quoi on va. On l'a vu, là il y a beaucoup de stands qui nous parlent de mobilité hydrogène.
C'est normal parce que la mobilité va être un des usages clés de l'utilisation de l'hydrogène dans les années à venir. Si on prend la dernière trajectoire réalisée par France Hydrogène, à peu près 30% de la production d'hydrogène servira aux usages de la mobilité dans l'ambition 2030+, à l'horizon 2030. Et on veut même aller plus loin puisqu'on ambitionne d'avoir un jalon intermédiaire en 2025 avec 50 000 véhicules utilitaires et véhicules légers, 1000 bus et 1000 camions. Donc autant vous dire qu'on aura besoin d'hydrogène et que la mobilité sera un des premiers leviers pour consommer l'hydrogène. La deuxième raison pour laquelle l'hydrogène dans la mobilité est importante, c'est que, je suis désolée messieurs les industriels, mais quelque part la mobilité est prête à payer un tout petit peu plus cher l'hydrogène que ce que les industriels sont prêts à payer. Donc là aussi, c'est de la création de valeur pour l'ensemble de la filière, mais avec un objectif partagé qui est que l'hydrogène soit compétitif et soit le plus propre possible.
Alors, une petite particularité dans votre positionnement, c'est que vous imaginez volontiers deux réseaux. Un réseau de véhicules, enfin un réseau d'alimentation de véhicules batterie lithium-ion et un réseau hydrogène. Est-ce qu'on n'est pas en train d'avoir deux outils pour faire la même chose ou comment ça va s'articuler?
Alors, il y a une étude, déjà c'est très contre-intuitif d'affirmer que financer deux réseaux d'infrastructures va coûter moins cher qu'un seul. Quand on dit ça, on se dit, mais finalement, comment on va faire? C'est une intuition qu'on a eue au niveau européen, qui part d'une étude allemande réalisée en 2019 par Jülich, qui montrait de façon très hypothétique, si j'ai 20 millions de véhicules électriques à batterie, combien coûte l'infrastructure? 50 milliards. Si j'ai 20 millions de véhicules électriques à hydrogène, combien ça coûte? 40 milliards. Et on s'est dit finalement, pourquoi opposer les technologies? Pourquoi opposer les réseaux? Comment on pourrait faire pour avoir un réseau versatile, diversifié, qui sert le maximum d'usages, avec des bandes de recharge là où ça fait sens, des stations hydrogène là où ça fait sens. Et cet après-midi, Hydrogen Council sort tout un communiqué de presse et un dossier qui pose les premières pierres de ce coût de l'infrastructure dans une approche combinée. Je vous donne un petit exemple. Une ville moyenne, 1000 véhicules, pour 1000 véhicules, si vous prenez 100% de véhicules électriques à batterie, le coût de l'infrastructure bande de recharge, les bandes de recharge, le câblage et l'upgrade du réseau électrique, c'est 5,8 millions de dollars. C'est une étude qui a été faite au niveau mondial. Si vous dites j'introduis 10% de véhicules hydrogène, 10% c'est pas beaucoup, 100 véhicules hydrogène, 900 véhicules batterie, vous économisez en net 1 million de dollars. Pourquoi ? Vous allez avoir un surcoût au niveau, bien sûr, des stations hydrogène, mais vous allez gagner sur les bandes de recharge et vous allez gagner aussi sur l'upgrade du réseau électrique et aussi sur tout ce qui est câblage. Donc, on est en train de pousser cet exercice jusqu'au bout. Il y a une étude très complète qui est réalisée donc, par le partenariat public-privé sur l'hydrogène et financée par la Commission européenne et dont les résultats seront disponibles en juillet. Et les résultats démontreront qu'il faut aller dans cette voie-là et ça permettra d'atteindre les objectifs de Fit for 55. Je vous rappelle, 30 millions de véhicules électriques d'ici 2030.
D'ici 2035, plus aucun véhicule thermique?
2035, arrêt de la production des véhicules thermiques. Donc, on ne peut pas se contenter d'une seule solution. Et on a une chance formidable quand on doit traiter la décarbonation du transport, c'est qu'on n'a pas une solution, on en a deux. On a la batterie, on a l'hydrogène, et dans certains cas de figure, les constructeurs ont décidé de faire des véhicules hybrides combinant une pile à combustible et une batterie.
Un tout petit dernier mot pour l'introduction de cette séquence. Par rapport à ce qu'on vient d'évoquer, on est en phase avec le 3 kg de CO2 par kilo d'hydrogène, taxonomie européenne, tout ça, ça passe?
Alors, j'espère que ça va passer. Ce qui est très bien, c'est qu'on va sortir du jeu des couleurs parce qu'entre l'hydrogène bleu clair, bleu foncé, rose, jaune, vert, gris, on s'y perd un petit peu. Donc, rien de mieux que les chiffres. Et c'est l'ambition de la taxonomie au niveau européen sera déclaré comme hydrogène propre, ce qui est en dessous de 3 kg de CO2 par kilo d'hydrogène produit. C'est clair, c'est net, c'est sans appel.
On écoute les témoignages des pays. On a Nicolas Smith qui est avec nous et Kim Schulz. On va commencer avec Nicolas Smith. Nicolas Smith, you're Business Development Manager at Ulmco and you're present at this roundtable, United Kingdom Fuel Cell Hydrogen Association. So, what is the strategy in the UK and what are the issues, specific issues concerning hydrogen?
Yeah, so the strategy that was released in summer by the UK aims to deliver the development of hydrogen economy in the UK by unlocking 4 billion of investment in blue and green hydrogen production, storage and use, which will create, obviously,
Like that.
speak slower, 10,000 of jobs, as well as support billions of pounds in investment and multiple export opportunities over the next decade. So the UK government set a target of 5 gigawatts of low carbon production by 2030, estimated that by 2030 the UK-wide hydrogen economy could be worth 900 million, create over 9,000 jobs, high-quality jobs and attract 4 billion of private investment, rising to 100,000 jobs and 13 billion pound market value by 2050. So we're adopting a twin-track approach of green electrolytic hydrogen, which we expect to be supported mainly through offshore wind, and blue carbon capture hydrogen production, which will be developed in industrial clusters, many of which are on coastal locations to take advantage to links of the storage sites and disused oil and gas fields. So by the early 2020s, we'll see small scale up to 20 megawatt green hydrogen project development at pace. So they're starting now with production and end use closely linked, such as transport depots and in the industrial sites as offtake. So then closely followed by the CCS, blue hydrogen production clusters. And by the end of the decade, the UK government anticipates multiple facilities across the UK with extensive cluster networks and integrating into the hydrogen energy system.
You have a lot of wind in the north of the country. Do you plan to build specific wind farm, offshore wind farm, to produce green hydrogen? Because your neighbor will explain us that they have a program for that.
Yeah, so absolutely, we need to capitalise on the UK's terrible weather. So I think particularly up in Scotland, there's a lot of projects in terms of the offshore wind generation, but the government are very firm in terms of the green and the blue, and it will be a combination that help the UK decarbonise in full by 2050.
Maybe we will have some information about what they plan to do. Mr. Kim Schulz, you are special counsel concerning clean tech, Invest in Denmark, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Denmark. Your ambassador is just in front of you. So, since 3 decades, you produce green electricity from your wind farm. I remember Tunoknob, sorry for the pronunciation, Tunoknob, Windebou, and then the big one, Ornsrev. So you have a lot of experience concerning the production of green electricity, and now you plan to use this green electricity directly offshore, on the offshore station, to produce electricity and to send it through pipeline, where? To some countries? Tell us about the cooperation you plan to organize.
Yes, that's correct, and thank you very much for being able to participate at this event, first of all. Yes, in Denmark, we do generate a lot of green power. Actually, today, around 50% of the power that we have in our grid is from wind power. And in total, 75% of the power in the grid is green power. And the forecast is that by 2027, 100% of the power in the grid is going to be green power from wind, from solar, from biomass. That's the main sources in Denmark. And in terms of wind, the expansion is really offshore wind from the Danish North Sea. And that's where we have the big potential. So actually out there in the North Sea, we have a potential of 40 gigawatt of wind power. And that's 3 times more than we need ourselves in Denmark. So there's a big potential for export of green energy to other European countries. So the foundation for the Power-to-X or the upcoming Power-to-X strategy in Denmark is really the very high ambitions we have in Denmark in terms of CO2 reduction, of the emissions of CO2. The Danish Parliament has decided by a big majority that by 2030 the carbon emissions should be reduced by 70% in Denmark. So that's a very high ambition indeed. And we have to move very quickly in order to achieve that. And indeed, Power-to-X is a very important part of that development. And our Prime Minister mentioned that last year when she opened the Parliament, she specifically said that Power-to-X is a very important element in this development that we have to go through in Denmark. And so it's not the power grid in terms of, or it's not the green power that's an issue, but it's really the sectors where you can't use power directly. So especially the transport sector with all the trucks and the ships and the airplanes, and also the agricultural sector is also emitting a lot of CO2 emissions. So we do need to have Power-to-X facilities in Denmark in order to create the green fuels for the transport sector, both for airplanes, for big trucks, and for ships. And an example is that the big Danish shipping company Maersk Line, they have just ordered 8 large-scale container vessels that should be run on e-methanol. They're actually the first vessel they are going to have operational running on green fuels is just in 2 years, a medium-sized container vessel. So the market is starting now. And then you have the airline companies that are looking for sustainable aviation fuels, and there will also be a market there. But as we have so much wind power in the North Sea, there's also big potential to export not only green electricity, which is quite expensive to transport, but certainly converting it at the coastline to hydrogen, to green hydrogen, and then export it by means of tubes, pipelines to the huge German market. And the Danish TSO and the German TSO Gasunie, they made a calculation recently that potentially Denmark could provide up to 25% of the future demand for green hydrogen in Germany, based on Danish offshore wind and pipelines.
That's to say you have a strong cooperation with Germany because you will send them a lot of green hydrogen. So what kind of cooperation? What are the terms of this cooperation?
Yes, Germany has a huge need for importing green hydrogen. They can only produce a minor share of what they are going to need to replace coal and natural gas and oil and green or grey hydrogen in the chemical industry. So they are looking for sources of green hydrogen all over the globe, in Australia, in Canada, in South America, North Africa. But definitely they also want to have very close, nearby suppliers of the green hydrogen. And there Denmark can step into the picture as soon as we have established pipelines. One other thing that is also important in terms of the Power-to-X business opportunities in Denmark is that we have very low power prices in Denmark compared to the rest of Europe. We have some of the lowest power prices in Denmark, according to EU statistics. And furthermore, the waste heat, when you convert green power into hydrogen, there's an energy loss about 25%, and that's mainly heat. But in Denmark, we have district heating systems that's actually heating 2/3 of all the houses in Denmark. And they are very prepared to offtake all that excess heat, all that waste heat, and even pay for it. So that will also improve the business case for Power-to-X facilities in Denmark. And that's also one of the reasons why already now there are 5 gigawatt scale Power-to-X projects that have been announced in Denmark. And one of them has also started physically in terms of establishment.
What is your feedback concerning the breaks? I mean, maybe there are some breaks, especially concerning the rules, the regulation, and what concerning the storage. What is the situation in Denmark?
In terms of energy storage, our TSO EnergyNet, in cooperation with a Danish wind project developer and an Irish energy storage company, are actually planning to use some of the existing salt caverns in Denmark. Some of them are used today for natural gas storage, but they can also be used for green hydrogen storage. So that's the planning. And furthermore, once we have a pipeline infrastructure, which partly is the existing natural gas pipeline infrastructure, then, of course, by increasing the pressure, we can also have some storage there. But the main capacity in terms of storage is the Danish salt caverns.
Thank you very much. You want to ask them something? What do you think about what we heard, this testimony?
I think that in Northern Europe, both in UK and both in Denmark, Germany as well, I mean, they're very much advanced into promoting green hydrogen using renewable energy, and that's a true game changer. You didn't mention, but Orkney Island, north of Scotland, I mean, was one of the first to use offshore wind in order to produce green hydrogen, in order to fuel buses, light delivery vehicles. In Denmark, you have champions, companies like the subsidiary who joined with Nel and active in infrastructure. Jacob Krogsgaard, CEO, is very much into developing infrastructure. You have buses fleet in Europe as well. So, I mean, now I'm glad because in Europe as well, we're seeing more and more Southern European countries coming into the hydrogen game because they realize they have plentiful of renewable energy, easily available thanks to solar panels. I'm mentioning Spain and Portugal. If you look at the intent of Spain, for example, based on the capacity production they want to build, we're talking about 73 gigawatt capacity production of green hydrogen using renewable energy. So there's a huge potential, but there's not one solution identical to every single country. Every country has to use the assets it has. And in France, we have many. In Denmark, you have you were mentioning renewable energy is very key. In UK, you have also a lot of coast. So using offshore wind can be a true game changer as well.
You mentioned the green resources in Spain and Portugal. Let's leave Europe, cross the Mediterranean Sea, and we can hear now the testimony of Mr. Badr Iken. Monsieur Badr Iken, si vous voulez bien nous rejoindre. We'll have the testimony of Morocco now. Badr Iken is General Manager of IRESEN. It's an institute in charge of research for solar energy and new energy in Morocco. Mr. Badr Iken is also co-president of the Green Energy Park, vice-president of the General Confederation of Morocco companies. It's something like the French MEDEF. So, in Morocco, green hydrogen is presented as the new oil. So, what is your ambition, your strategy? What do you imagine? What program and what help do you give to this activity and to the players in Morocco?
Thank you very much, Mr. Rocher. First of all, I have to say that now, since more than 10 years, Morocco is really committed to renewable energies, and we had launched very important solar energy power plants as well as wind power plants. We recognized really the opportunity that we have to try to valorize our huge renewable energy resources, to put wind and solar in bottles, and to be able then to export this energy. We started now 4 years ago with different studies. We conducted studies to identify the technology's maturity, to evaluate markets as well as technical economic aspects, and we launched 2 months ago our green hydrogen roadmap. I have to say that I am more color blind. I see only now green hydrogen. We are committed only for green hydrogen. We launched our strategy, and the target is really to support the development of this new sector and to be ready for the day after tomorrow. We have now the roadmap with 8 pillars. We set up one national commission for green hydrogen. We set up one industrial cluster for green hydrogen and the president of the cluster is as well represented today with us. And the idea was really to work on the regulatory framework. We're installing, by the beginning of next year, one applied R&D platform with different pilot projects. We will start with green ammonia, green methanol, as well as for power-to-liquid, synthetic kerosene, and synthetic diesel. We have to work on the master plan of the infrastructures. And I think there is clearly an opportunity to cooperate together, because if we would like then to have a trade of hydrogen, we have to overcome all the different barriers, to work on standards, on certificates of guarantee of origins, and so on. And maybe if you allow me, I would like then to say, because I heard then the session before, international cooperation, and especially then regional cooperation, is a key and is very important. A few years ago, I was involved in the development of the solar PV industry, and we saw a lot of goodwill in Europe and in other regions. And we tried, and every country tried then to do it by its own. And we saw now that the big market is not anymore in Europe, but in Asia. We have to cooperate together because we have smaller markets, and I think that the regional cooperation might allow us in a few years to have really regional industrial clusters, because we are a joint market, and we believe because of our renewable energy resources, we have wind, we have solar energy, we have sites combining both, we might be then really able to decarbonize our economy and to cooperate our partners, to support our partners to decarbonize partly a part of their economy, especially then Europe.
How do you imagine to send your green hydrogen to Germany or other countries in Europe?
But I think in our roadmap, we think that it would be for the next 10 years, because we have different phases. We speak about then the short-term phases till 2030, then the mid-term starting by 2030 till then 2035, 2038, and then the long term after 2038. We think that at the beginning it would be more green ammonia. Why green ammonia? Because we have already existing facilities. Morocco is importing every year 2 million tons of ammonia. It means we're able to produce for our local domestic need and domestic market, as well as to use the existing facilities to export the ammonia. And this is much easier to transport ammonia as to transport, or green ammonia, as to transport hydrogen. Methanol would be as well, will play an important role. And maybe synthetic fuels for the midterm, not for the domestic market, but more for the export. Those would be then the first, I would say, derivatives of green hydrogen. And then later on, I think that the technologies are still in a development phase. We would be then able, on a competitive matter, to export as well green hydrogen, not only using maritime transport, but using pipelines, and to develop joint infrastructures would be very important.
Do you push public-private partnership in Morocco for the production of green hydrogen?
Definitely. When I started then to speak about the strategy, the national strategy, we really wanted to have the cooperation between the public and the private sector. And this is why we have a very close and strong cooperation between the National Commission and the cluster Green Hydrogen. And this is important because we believe, and this is why we have a lot of actions and activities to prepare the market for the private sector. The public sector will support this development for the private sector.
Thank you very much, Badr Iken. What do you think about the situation? We heard the situation in Quebec province. We heard the situation in Morocco. What do you think? It's not only a European case, this development of hydrogen.
Europe is one of the leading areas, but the cooperation between region like Morocco very active in and having an overall quantity of renewable energy is key to make the strategy of Europe. Just to remember you one key figure, the strategy announced by Europe is twice 40 gigawatt. 40 gigawatt capacity production in Europe, but 40 gigawatt coming out of cooperation with non-European countries. And I know that Frans Timmermans, the first vice president of the European Commission, is a fan of working with Morocco, and there has been a memorandum of understanding being signed between Morocco and the European Union in order to foster this huge capacity production outside of Europe. Europe is not forgotten, but other countries are important as well. Regarding your question concerning how fast can hydrogen go, just to remind you a big number. We have seen an acceleration in the number of projects developing not only mobility projects, but also in industry and in other areas. You have something like 500 projects worldwide. And if you look at the total investment that is being put into the pipe, we're talking about $155 billion $155 billion of money to be invested in hydrogen projects. Out of these 500 projects, more 60% of it are based in Europe. Out of these 500 projects, nearly 40 to 50% of it are being considered mature. So it's moving fast, and we need to keep pace. There's a lot of money to be invested. The good news is that the funds are mobilizing themselves in order to put money on hydrogen. I'm sure you haven't missed the announcement of a huge fund, Hy24, with 1.5 billion euro to be spent on hydrogen in a major infrastructure project. There will be the first, but I'm sure that many others will follow.
Kim Schulz, you have heard the Moroccan testimony. So what do you think? What do you imagine? You will have a lot of green hydrogen produced in the north of Europe by your green island with wind, and you will have a lot of green hydrogen produced maybe with solar, but not only. There is a lot of wind also in Morocco. I've been there. I've organized some event concerning wind energy. So do you imagine green hydrogen coming both from north of Europe and coming from the Mediterranean Sea?
Yes, definitely. I think that will be the future, because there's a tremendous need for the green hydrogen in Europe. So you need to get it both from Europe and also from outside Europe. It's so much capacity, it's so much natural gas, so much coal, so much oil and fossil fuels that have to be replaced. So that's necessary. It's a tremendous amount that we have to create over the next 10 to 20 years. So you also had a question about public-private partnership, and in Denmark we do it that way that the authorities and the government, they provide the right framework conditions, and the TSO provide the power to the big projects, and hopefully also the pipeline infrastructure in future. And then we invite private companies to do the specific Power-to-X projects. And we have already had a lot of interest from foreign companies. So for example, Life here from France have started a project up in Denmark. And H2 Energy from Switzerland has started or has announced a gigawatt scale project in Denmark. And from Germany, Linde Gas has also announced a project in Denmark. So we do see companies from abroad coming to Denmark to do Power-to-X projects, not only for the Danish market, but also for the European market.
Nicolas Smith, your reaction after the presentation of the Moroccan program, and concerning the public-private partnership, do you use them also? Do you push them in the UK?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of what I'm doing in the UK HFCA is to build those relationships with other countries that we can facilitate export and capitalising on what we're doing to to export the hydrogen. But yeah, echoing some of the comments, of course, a lot of green hydrogen needs to be produced, and there's a lot of areas that will be able to utilize the production that's being made elsewhere. So yeah, we very much continue to push that out and support that.
Thank you very much. Do you want a final word for this party of the roundtable?
I think you gathered a bunch of experts, which is very interesting because you have Northern Europe, you have non-European countries, but key in achieving the energy transition that we need with hydrogen. And I think we're on the good path, so thank you very much.
It's not finished. We must hear something about what is happening in Germany. Thank you very much, madame. Merci beaucoup, messieurs, d'avoir participé à cette table ronde.